They all saw the wine stain. Only one man saw the humiliation. The Harbor House was loud that Friday night. Glasses clinking too sharp, laughter carrying too far, salt air drifting in every time the door swung open to mix with grilled salmon and diesel fumes from the marina down the block. Ethan Hayes sat near the back with his 8-year-old daughter, Lily, splitting a cheeseburger and fries because payday was still 2 days out, and because Lily insisted on calling it their fancy dinner, even with a tear in the vinyl booth and a ketchup bottle sticky at the cap. Ethan didn't mind. He'd spent enough years on open water and enough nights since, learning how fast life could strip a man down to what actually mattered. A warm meal. His daughter's laugh. One quiet evening. That was enough. Until the room shifted. A woman near the center aisle rose too fast, her black dress catching the light for half a second before a splash of red bloomed across the front of it. Gasps rippled out. Then came the voice, loud, polished, and cruel in the way rich men mistake for confidence. Maybe now you'll stop pretending you belong in rooms like this, Claire. Some people looked away. Some smiled into their drinks. The woman stood frozen, one hand trembling at her side, the other white-knuckled around her purse strap like it was the only thing holding her up. Ethan saw what everyone else missed, the particular way shame makes a person want to vanish while still standing in plain sight. Lily saw it too. She turned to him with those wide eyes that always asked the question before her mouth caught up. Daddy? Ethan set down his napkin. Slow. Deliberate. His old navy jacket creased at the elbows as he rose. And for one brief second the room seemed to notice how he stood. Not flashy, not angry, just steady, like a man who'd learned long ago that control mattered more than noise. He crossed to the woman's table, lifted a clean linen napkin from an empty setting, and offered it to her before he ever looked at the man who'd humiliated her. Ma'am, he said gently, you don't have to stand here alone. Then he turned. And you, he said, voice low enough that people leaned in to hear. If it takes an audience to embarrass a woman, you're already the weakest man in this room. The man blinked, almost amused, like a stranger in a faded jacket had no business interrupting him. Excuse me. Ethan didn't move. You heard me. Behind him, Lily slid out of the booth clutching her cream-colored cardigan in both hands. She carried it to Claire with the solemn courage only children seem to have, and when she held it up, Claire's face cracked, not into tears exactly, but into the effort of holding them back. You can use this, Lily whispered. The room went quieter than it had any right to. Not silent yet. Close. And at the table by the window, a silver-haired man in a charcoal suit set down his bourbon and watched Ethan Hayes very, very carefully. Ethan didn't know his name. Didn't know the man owned enough buildings to alter the city's skyline, or that before the night was over, this stranger would remember every word he'd just spoken. All Ethan knew was that a woman had been humiliated in front of his daughter, and some lines, once crossed, demand that a decent man stand up. Brandon Cole recovered first, and when he did, it was with the kind of smile that had probably bullied its way through half the city. He straightened his cuff, glanced around as if expecting the crowd to laugh on cue, then let his eyes settle on Ethan with open contempt. This is between me and her, he said. Go sit down before you embarrass yourself in front of your kid. Ethan didn't step closer. He shifted half a step instead, angling himself so Claire and Lily were no longer exposed to Brandon's glare. A small movement, almost invisible, but one that changed the geometry of the moment entirely. Then stop making it everyone's business, Ethan said. You made sure the whole room heard you. You don't get to call it private now. A waiter froze mid-stride, a tray of iced tea balanced at his shoulder. Claire clutched Lily's cardigan to her chest, cheeks burning, but she wasn't shrinking anymore. There was something about standing beside a man who didn't posture, didn't perform, didn't seem remotely interested in winning the room. He was only interested in drawing a line and holding it. Brandon looked him up and down. The faded jacket, the work boots, the tired eyes of a man who'd carried more than he ever talked about. What are you supposed to be? Some washed-up hero with a rescue complex? Ethan's expression barely changed. Lily grabbed the hem of his jacket, and he rested a hand over hers without breaking eye contact. No, he said quietly. Just a father teaching his daughter what a decent man does when someone's being humiliated in public. The words landed harder than if he'd shouted them. Silverware stopped clinking. A woman near the bar forgot to finish her sip. Then Lily, with the fearless sincerity only children possess, looked up at Claire and said, "My daddy does this a lot. He says nobody should ever feel small on purpose." The room didn't laugh this time. It seemed to exhale. "I believe the young lady could use a seat," said the silver-haired man by the window, rising and adjusting his cuff. He nodded toward the empty chair beside him. "And I believe the rest of us could use a reminder of what grace looks like when it walks in wearing old boots." Brandon turned, irritated at being challenged twice in one evening. But something shifted in his face the instant he recognized who was speaking. Respect mixed with alarm. Fear, maybe. The older man gave nothing away. He held Claire's gaze with surprising gentleness, then looked at Ethan as if filing him away somewhere that mattered. Brandon muttered something under his breath, paid his bill with a clipped motion, and walked out beneath the brass lamps, taking his bitterness with him. The room began to breathe again. Glasses lifted. Conversations resumed in careful fragments. "Adrian," the older man said, offering his hand to Ethan. The grip was firm, unshowy, the kind that reminded him of old commanders who'd learned to speak less and observe more. "Ethan," he replied, "this is my daughter, Lily. You were very brave tonight, Lily." She shrugged with the seriousness of a child trying to seem older. "I just gave her my sweater. Sometimes that's the bravest thing in the room." Adrian gestured to the window table. "Would the three of you join me? I have a feeling none of us should pretend this evening was normal." "Only for a minute," Ethan said. "Lily has school in the morning." "A man after structure," Adrian said, nodding like he respected the answer more than instant agreement. They moved to the table where candlelight flickered against polished wood and the harbor shimmered beyond the glass. Adrian ordered dessert for the table without asking, chocolate lava cake included, at Lily's wide-eyed insistence, cleared by one glance at her father. Warmth crept back into the evening. Adrian watched all of it. The way Ethan folded Lily's napkin before handing it to her. The way he made sure Claire had water before touching his own glass. The stillness of a man who'd learned to come home from storms without dragging them into the room. This quiet father in the old jacket, Adrian began to suspect, was not simply a good man. He was the kind forged somewhere most people don't survive without losing themselves. "You don't have to tell us anything," Ethan said eventually, voice pitched low, "just for their table. But if there's a reason that man keeps showing up in your life, it might help to say it out loud." Claire looked at the candle flame trembling in the draft each time the door opened. She took something from that. A breath, maybe, or permission. "His name is Brandon Cole. He sits on the board of the Ashford Arts Foundation. They fund community programs, scholarships, grants, or so they say. I run a music outreach program on the South Side. Free lessons for kids whose families can't afford instruments, let alone private teachers. Folding chairs in church basements. An out-of-tune piano that's seen better decades. And Brandon wants control of it," Ethan said. "He wants the foundation to fold it into one of his gala initiatives. More cameras, more donors, more branding. Less music, less access, less dignity for the kids it's supposed to help. I told him no 3 weeks ago. Told him no again at a board dinner. Tonight was his way of reminding me that men like him don't hear no as an answer. They hear it as an insult." Lily, unbothered by adult politics, slid her untouched ice cream toward Claire. "You can have the rest of mine. It helps with bad nights." Claire's eyes shone. "Thank you," she whispered. "And what does Brandon actually gain?" Adrian asked. "If your program becomes his project?" A pause. "Public image," Claire said first. Then, quieter, "and access to the building where we hold summer workshops. The old Langford Conservatory. The city wants to sell it. Brandon wants the land." Something clicked behind Adrian's eyes, bigger than sympathy, bigger than outrage. But he only lifted his coffee and asked, calm as a man walking ground he already knew. "And if he doesn't get what he wants, what happens next?" Claire looked down at the wine stain still faint beneath Lily's cardigan. "Whatever he has to do to make me disappear without ever laying a hand on me." Adrian let the sentence settle before he turned back to Ethan with a question that felt sharper for how casually he asked it. "Would you have stepped in if she hadn't looked vulnerable?" "What do you mean?" "You saw a beautiful woman in trouble. Men have confused chivalry with attraction for centuries. I wonder if your sense of justice would have moved as fast for someone older, plainer, harder to sympathize with." Ethan recognized a test when he heard one. Some come in uniform, some in $1,000 suits over coffee. I didn't stand up because she was beautiful, he said. I stood up because she was being humiliated and everyone else was pretending not to see it. That's not always the profitable choice. Neither was joining the Navy at 19. Still did that too. Something flickered across Adrian's face. Interest. Respect. Lily broke the tension, licking chocolate off her spoon. My dad always picks the unprofitable thing. Last month, he gave our jumper cables to Mrs. Ramirez and had to bum a ride to work. Claire laughed, a real one, hand over her mouth. Even Adrian smiled. That does sound inconvenient. It was, Ethan said. But she had groceries melting in her trunk and 2 grandkids in the back seat. Seemed like the right kind of inconvenience. Adrian set a cream-colored business card face down on the table, not pushing it toward anyone yet. The city board meets in 10 days about the Langford property. If Brandon's circling it, what happened tonight wasn't personal. It was strategic. Claire went pale. How do you know about the board meeting? I make it my business to know when old buildings with public value are about to become private trophies. Ethan noticed the answer without missing what it dodged. Deliberate. Careful. Why are you helping me? Claire asked. Adrian looked at Lily, then Ethan, then back to her. Because once, someone protected something I loved before they knew whether it would benefit them. I haven't forgotten what that costs. By then the restaurant had thinned, chairs upturned near the bar, the harbor gone dark except for masked lights swaying in the distance. Lily yawned against Ethan's arm. It was late. Too late for a school night. Too late for a conversation that had become more dangerous than the raised voices that started it. Ethan rose. We should go. Adrian stood too. Keep the card, he told Claire. You may need it sooner than you think. Then, to Ethan, his tone deepening. The world has a habit of punishing men who still do the decent thing in public. Be careful what tonight costs you. I already am, Ethan said, steady as ever. But walking Lily toward the door, the cold harbor wind waiting past the glass, he couldn't shake the feeling that the silver-haired stranger hadn't just warned him. He'd recognized something in him. And whatever it was, it had only begun to matter. By 7 the next morning, Harbor Point Marina was already alive with sounds Ethan trusted more than people. Gull cries, ropes knocking against cleats, an outboard motor churning somewhere in the fog. He stood in Bay 3 with a cooling mug of coffee and a socket wrench, working a bad fuel sender on a 19-foot center console, grateful for a problem that didn't ask him to explain his morals to strangers. Machines broke honestly. People rarely did. He'd just slid out from under the console when his foreman, Rick Mercer, broad, weathered, late 50s, eyes permanently squinted from 3 decades of sun glare, appeared in the bay entrance with his jaw set the way it got when trouble arrived before breakfast. He held up his phone without a word. There Ethan was, frozen mid-turn toward Brandon, the frame cropped so tight it looked like confrontation instead of protection. Local marina worker causes scene at Harbor House after drinks, one caption read. Another called him unstable. Another said he'd frightened a donor tied to City Arts funding. It's everywhere, Rick said. Somebody clipped the footage and fed it to the local pages before sunrise. Ethan watched 6 silent seconds and handed it back. No context. No Lily. No wine on Claire's dress. No Brandon's voice cutting the room like a blade disguised as a joke. Just a tired man in an old jacket standing up and looking inconvenient. I didn't touch anybody, he said. I know that. But the marina board got 2 calls this morning. One from a donor with a 60-foot Bertram in slip 8. One from a city council office asking if we employ men with volatile public behavior. Their words. Rick scrubbed a hand over his beard. I'm taking you off the schedule for the week. Not fired. Just off. Until this dies down. Ethan looked past him at the marina, at the gray water turning silver under the rising sun, as if the world hadn't just shifted beneath him. A week without payment rent got tight. Groceries turned into arithmetic, and the field trip slip on the kitchen counter would sit unsigned. He nodded once. Understood. Do not do that, Rick said. Do what? Take it like it's reasonable. You stood up for somebody. Half this dock knows you. But rich people with bruised egos move faster than truth. And I've got a business to keep afloat. I know, Ethan said, and that was the worst part. He knew exactly how fast decent men became liabilities when money got embarrassed in public. He finished his repair, cleaned his tools, and drove home with the windows cracked to let out the smell of grease and salt. Lily was waiting on the front steps in her school sneakers, chewing a strawberry breakfast bar, scanning the street for his truck the way she always did. One look at his face, and she knew. Kids who grow up with grief learn to read silence like other kids read storybooks. You got sent home, she said. Just for a few days. Because of last night. He never lied to her. Yeah. She looked at her shoes, then back up with more steel than any 8-year-old should need. That's dumb. He laughed despite himself. It's a little dumb. She took his hand. Are we still okay? Not about money. About them. Ethan crouched to her height on the weathered walk and brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. We're okay. A bad week doesn't get to decide what kind of family we are. Lily searched his face for cracks, found none, and nodded like she was accepting a mission briefing. Okay. By 10:30, sitting at the kitchen table with a legal pad and a stack of bills, there was a knock at the door. Claire stood on the porch in jeans and a camel coat, guilt written across her guarded face, a bakery box in one hand and Adrian's cream-colored card in the other. I think what happened to you this morning is my fault, she said. And I think Brandon is only getting started. Ethan let her in, moving Lily's library books off the entry bench. The house was small, clean, practical, every dollar with a job. A faded couch under the front window. Spelling words taped to the fridge in crooked marker. A second-hand upright piano against the far wall, one key chipped at the edge. Claire noticed it right away. It was my wife's, Ethan said, setting the bakery box down. Lily takes lessons Saturdays, when we can manage it. Claire ran her fingers over the bench like she was touching something sacred. It's beautiful. Over mismatched mugs of coffee, while Lily finished brushing her teeth upstairs, Claire's guilt sharpened into a warning. Brandon called an hour ago. He said this is what happens when people mistake pity for courage. The gala's tomorrow night, the Foundation's annual donor event at the Langford Conservatory. It's supposed to raise scholarship money, but Brandon plans to announce a redevelopment partnership. If he gets enough board signatures in that room, the conservatory becomes his project before the city meeting ever happens. And you? I'm scheduled to perform. Cello solo, donor remarks, smiling photos with people who've never set foot in the neighborhoods they claim to help. He expects me to show up, play nice, and quietly step aside while he turns my program into a branding tool. Lily bounded down the stairs and lit up at the sight of Claire. You came back. I did. Did you bring peace offerings? Ethan coughed to cover a laugh. Claire actually laughed. Blueberry muffins. I was told they help with guilt. They help with everything, Lily said solemnly, taking one. For a moment the kitchen felt ordinary, and maybe that was why Claire finally said the rest without trying to shrink it. I don't think Brandon just wants the property. I think he wants someone to stand up tomorrow night and publicly agree that I mishandled the program, and that he's stepping in to save it. He wants you to bless your own replacement, Ethan said. Yes, and if I refuse, he'll keep pushing until there's nothing left of my reputation to protect. Lily, mid-muffin, frowned with the moral clarity only an 8-year-old can summon before 8 in the morning. That sounds like cheating. It is, Ethan said. The school bus sighed to a stop outside. Ethan walked Lily to the door, zipped her coat to her chin, crouched to her level. You remember what I said this morning? A bad week doesn't get to decide what kind of family we are. That's right. He kissed the top of her head and watched until she was safely on the bus. When he came back inside, something in him had settled. Not anger. Decision. He sat across from Claire. Then you're not going alone tomorrow night. Ethan, you already got taken off work because of me. No. I got taken off work because a man with money got embarrassed in public and needed somebody else to pay for it. That's not on you. He glanced toward the window where the bus had vanished down the block. But if Brandon thinks fear and a microphone let him corner you in a room full of donors, he shouldn't have picked a woman who still has witnesses. Hope flickered where guilt had been. Claire set Adrian's card on the table. One more thing. Adrian called before I came here. He said if we're going to stop Brandon, tomorrow night can't just be about surviving the gala. It has to force the truth into the open where money can't quietly bury it again. Did he say how? He said to tell you this exactly. Bring your daughter, if you trust her with hard truths. And whatever happens, don't leave before the music ends. The Langford Conservatory had always been a place where music mattered more than money, and even now it carried itself that way. White columns glowed under warm uplighting, Limestone steps swept clean for tailored coats and polished shoes. Crystal chandeliers spilling light over tuxedos and silk gowns, and the particular hush of a room full of people waiting to be impressed. Ethan felt out of place the second he stepped through the doors in his one dark suit, the one he'd worn to his wife's memorial and exactly 3 parent-teacher conferences since. Lily stood beside him in a navy dress with a velvet ribbon, holding his hand like she understood this wasn't just an event. It was a line in the sand. Claire met them near the side entrance, already in deep midnight blue, her cello case upright beside her like a second spine. Elegant in a way that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with discipline, though Ethan could still see the strain behind her eyes. You came. You asked me to. Lily hugged her around the waist. You're going to do great. And if any bad people start talking, I can glare pretty hard. Claire laughed under her breath and kissed the top of Lily's head. That may be the most reassuring thing anyone said to me all week. A bell chimed, low and polished, and the crowd drifted toward their seats. Ethan and Lily took the third row while Claire disappeared backstage. At the front, beneath the conservatory crest, a podium sat flanked by screens cycling through photos of scholarship recipients and ribbon cuttings. Noble looking to anyone who didn't know how much of it was theater. Brandon Cole took the stage in a black suit and a smile built for cameras. The applause was polite, practiced, empty. He thanked the board, praised the foundation, spoke at length about legacy and stewardship and bringing modern vision to historic spaces. Lily shifted beside Ethan. I don't like his face. You're not required to, Ethan murmured, and a few people nearby chuckled, not mocking her, just recognizing the plain truth only a child bothers to say out loud. Brandon moved into his closing remarks with the smooth confidence of a man who believed the room belonged to him. Before tonight's performance, I believe in transparency. Our foundation has recently uncovered serious concerns regarding the leadership of our outreach division. Concerns I'd hoped to address privately. Unfortunately, when people choose spectacle over accountability, public clarification becomes necessary. The room tightened before the first image even appeared. The restaurant clip. Cropped. Silent. Deliberately misleading. Ethan turning toward Brandon. Claire barely in frame. The stain on her dress nearly invisible. Murmurs rippled through the hall. Lily's fingers found Ethan's sleeve. This is the man Miss Bennett has chosen to associate with, Brandon said, sighing as though burdened by his own virtue, while rejecting the foundation's efforts to stabilize her program. A man who caused a public disturbance, frightened guests, and now appears to be influencing her professional decisions through personal involvement. Backstage, Claire had gone still. The stillness of someone realizing her humiliation had been scheduled into the evening like a catering order. Ethan rose before he'd fully decided to. Not quickly, not angrily, with the same steady control that had carried him through storm decks, hospital rooms, and every hard conversation with a daughter learning too young that life could change overnight. The room noticed. Brandon's smile sharpened, like this was exactly what he'd hoped for. Ethan stepped into the aisle, one hand briefly on Lily's shoulder, then moved forward alone. You can lie about me if that helps you feel important, he said, his voice carrying without effort through the old acoustics. But don't use a woman's fear and a child's eyes as props for your ego. Silence dropped so fast it felt physical. Brandon stared, caught between outrage and disbelief that a man he'd already tried to erase was standing in the middle of his gala, speaking like he had every right to be heard. Then, from the back of the hall, a familiar voice cut through the stillness. That, Adrian Whitmore said, stepping into the light, is precisely why this evening isn't going to end the way you planned. He didn't hurry to the stage. He didn't need to. The room parted before he'd taken 5 steps, the way rooms do when power stops pretending to be anonymous. Brandon's confidence drained in real time. Board members straightened. A woman near the aisle set down her champagne flute, so fast it rang against the armrest. Claire stood frozen in the wings, realizing the stranger from the restaurant had never been a stranger at all. Adrian took the microphone from Brandon without asking and turned to the audience with the calm of a man who'd spent a lifetime making hard truths sound almost merciful. For those who haven't connected the dots, he said, I'm Adrian Whitmore, Chairman Emeritus of the Ashford Arts Foundation, primary trustee of the Langford Conservatory Endowment, and the person who's been quietly funding this institution for the last 11 years, so that men like Brandon Cole would never be the loudest voice in a room meant to serve children. Whispers rolled through the hall and died. Adrian lifted a hand toward the projection booth. If we're discussing transparency tonight, let's start with the full version. The screen flickered. The restaurant clip returned, but earlier this time. Claire's dress in full view. Brandon's hand knocking over the wine. His voice, clear and mocking, making sure the whole room could hear. Then Ethan rising, offering a napkin. Lily bringing her cardigan. Ethan speaking without anger, only principle. The hall watched every second in total silence, and when it ended, the silence only deepened. Brandon reached for the microphone. Adrian stepped back just enough to deny him the moment. You manipulated footage to discredit a woman protecting a community program, and a veteran who defended her with more grace than anyone else in this room showed last night, Adrian said. You also failed to mention the emails your office sent pressuring board members to transfer the conservatory's redevelopment rights into a private shell company linked to your own consulting group. A gasp moved through the crowd. Brandon's face went white. That's not what this is, he snapped, but panic had replaced authority in his voice. Adrian looked at him with the kind of disappointment that humbles a man faster than rage ever could. No, what this is, Brandon, is the end of your access. He turned to the board. Effective immediately, Mr. Cole is suspended from all foundation activity, pending a full financial review. The city attorney's office already has the documents. They received them 43 minutes ago. Someone in the second row exhaled audibly. Ethan looked at Claire. The rigid fear was gone, replaced by something fragile and disbelieving, like she'd braced for public ruin and instead been handed back her name. Then Adrian turned away from Brandon entirely and faced the crowd, lowering the microphone slightly, as if what came next mattered more. One more correction, he said. The man some of you were just encouraged to dismiss as unstable and unfit spent 9 years in the United States Navy as a rescue swimmer. 12 years ago, during a storm off the Carolina coast, Petty Officer Ethan Hayes went into 40-degree water and pulled 3 civilians to safety after a charter vessel lost power near the shoals. He didn't ask for recognition then. He didn't seek it last night. He didn't stand up in that restaurant because anyone was watching. He stood up because dignity matters to him, whether it's profitable or not. No one moved. Lily's small hand slipped into Ethan's, her eyes shining with the fierce, uncomplicated pride only a child carries when the world finally sees what she's always known. We spend a great deal of time in rooms like this talking about character like it's a branding strategy, Adrian went on, voice softening in a way that landed harder. It isn't. Character is what a man does when humiliating someone would be easier than defending them, when silence costs less than decency, and nobody in the room has the courage to stand except the one person with the least to gain. He looked at Ethan, not as a benefactor, not as a billionaire, but as one man recognizing another. Mr. Hayes, on behalf of a foundation that nearly forgot what it was built for. Thank you. The first applause came from Lily. One sharp clap, then another, small hands refusing to wait for adults to find their conscience. It broke the spell. The room rose in waves. Board members, donors, musicians, staff. An entire hall standing not for money or spectacle, but for a tired single father in an old suit who'd simply refused to let cruelty go unanswered. Ethan looked uncomfortable, if anything, and Adrian seemed to respect him more for it. Claire crossed to him at the edge of the aisle before her performance, took Lily's cardigan from where it had ridden folded over a chair all evening, and pressed it into Ethan's hands. I think this saved me twice. The corner of his mouth lifted, the first real smile Claire had seen from him. Lily will be glad it did. She looked at Lily next. Would it be all right if I played the song your mother used to love? Ethan froze. He'd never told her that. Then he remembered the piano in his living room, the sheet music stacked on top, the title penciled faintly across the first page from when she'd stood in his kitchen that morning. He swallowed once and nodded. Yeah, it would. The hall dimmed. Claire sat beneath the chandelier light, drew the bow across the strings, and the first notes rose warm and aching into the rafters like something long buried finally finding air. It wasn't flashy music. It didn't beg for applause. It sounded like winter thawing, like grief making room for hope without announcing itself. Lily curled into Ethan's side before the second movement ended, cheek against his arm, and he stood there listening, eyes on Claire, hand resting lightly on his daughter's shoulder, grounding himself in the two miracles still left to him. When the final note faded, no one seemed eager to break the quiet. Not a scandal, not a gala. Something rarer, a man keeping his dignity, a woman getting her voice back, a child learning that kindness isn't weakness even when it costs you something to keep it. The weeks that followed didn't turn Ethan into a celebrity, and he'd have hated it if they had. Rick Mercer put him back on the schedule with an apology and a raise he swore was overdue anyway. The city board blocked the redevelopment deal and voted to preserve Langford as a public arts conservatory, with Claire's outreach program given permanent space on the first floor and full funding through a new educational trust Adrian established in his late wife's name. Brandon Cole vanished from the board circuit almost overnight. Not dramatic ruin, just the quieter punishment of doors closing and calls going unreturned. Adrian offered Ethan a position overseeing veteran family initiatives at the foundation, flexible hours, decent pay, dignity built into the role, and Ethan finally said yes, after asking only one question, whether he could still do school pickup Tuesdays and Thursdays. Adrian laughed, then answered the only way a man like Ethan would accept. That'll be the first responsibility in your job description. Spring came to Harbor Point a little at a time. Daffodils outside the church on Mason Street, longer light over the marina after 5 o'clock. On a Sunday afternoon in April, Claire held the first children's concert in the restored recital hall at Langford. Folding chairs filled with parents in work boots, nurses in scrubs, grandparents with cameras, boys in clip-on ties, and girls smoothing recital dresses over nervous knees. Ethan sat in the back row, where he preferred it, Lily beside him in patent leather shoes, swinging her legs, holding a program with Claire's name on the front. When the children bowed and the room erupted, Ethan's eyes went to Claire, who was already looking at him. No dramatic declaration, just a quiet understanding passing between them over a room full of music and second chances. Later, after the chairs were stacked and the last family gone, Claire found Ethan beneath the conservatory steps, the evening air smelling faintly of rain and tulips. Lily was asleep in the back seat of his truck, one ballet flat missing, chin tucked into her sweater collar. Claire handed him a paper cup of coffee from the corner diner. "You know," she said, "for a man who keeps insisting he's not a hero, you make a habit of showing up exactly when people need one." Ethan looked through the windshield at his sleeping daughter, one hand still curled around her recital program. "I'm not a hero. I'm just trying to raise my daughter into the kind of person who doesn't look away." Claire smiled, and there was healing in it now instead of hurt. "Then you're doing a remarkable job." He took the coffee. Neither of them spoke for a moment. The harbor wind moved gently through the trees, and somewhere downtown a church bell rang the quarter hour. It wasn't a grand ending. It was better than that. Quiet. Earned. The kind of peace that only arrives after truth has finally had its say. As Ethan opened the truck door and Claire reached in to tuck the blanket back around Lily's shoulders, the world didn't need applause to understand what had happened there. A good man had stood up when it would have been easier to stay seated. A little girl had learned that kindness can change the shape of a room. And a woman who nearly lost everything had found herself not rescued, but respected. In the end, that was the miracle after all.